It'll be great if eventually they maybe allow us to do more than just two people at a time, or maybe they do already. I'm not sure.
Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good. How are you doing, sir?
I'm great. I gotta start off by saying I was very self-conscious with the lack of books behind me compared to yours.
Dude.
I, I, I
Well, yeah,
was even,
I'm still working on a lot of these books. I've got a lot to still finish. So
I'm mostly thinking about it all morning. Like, God damn, like he's gonna have he's got like his bookshelf with all these. He looks like a learned doctor. It's just an empty room.
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so why don't we quickly do some sort of introductions, I guess, for anyone who's going to join or even watch this repost later uh, from both of our sort of groups of followings. So kind of everyone knows kind of, who we are. And I'll let you start if you want. Go ahead.
All right, cool. Yeah. So, Steve, my name's Steve McRae. So, my background is predominantly in biomechanics. So, I have my master's in biomechanics. Where I studied predominantly joint rotation and kinematics and kinetics and joint rotation in athletes, so rotational athletes. So, I was looking really specifically at the lumbar kinematics of golfers, but I also related that to baseball players, lacrosse players, any sort of sport where there was a rotational element. And since then, so I've been a strength coach for what 2010. So yeah, so the what do you get for? Is there an anniversary present for the 10th year?
You got to watch.
No, no. I was
Yeah.
been a strength coach for 10 years, but I'd really say it's one of those things like you look back at it, some of the programs I was making for people in my year 3 or 4, I I was just throwing shit at the wall and hope it stuck, right?
Yeah.
So it hasn't been for the last 2 years where I feel like I've sort of come into my own and I'm making sort of conscious decisions, and it's I'm doing things for a real reason, and it's not just, oh, I think this is the next phase to progress. It's one of the things that I love the most about the fitness industry is what I think I know now, 5 years from now could be completely different. So
Right. Yeah. It's
it's
constantly
I think,
evolving, right? Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah. So Steve and I, for those of you watching, we work together at one of the private golf and country clubs here in the city. And we've had the privilege of sharing some clients too, which has been great because we have very similar philosophies. But today we're going to be talking about a very specific topic. Before we go into that, though, I'll give my introduction real quick. So my name is Ruli. I'm a registered massage therapist, former sort of strength coach and athletic trainer, and also a fascial stretch specialist. So my introduction into fitness actually came through military. I was in the Canadian Armed Forces for about 9 years as a paratrooper before getting into bodywork and massage. So everything that I learned to do from an early stage of my career was just what I knew through my drill sergeants and instructors, which was to do everything with maximum violence, speed, and aggression. So that's kind of how I knew how to train people, and that was my approach. And through that journey, I realized, I was just beating the living snot out of my clients through exercise, not realizing, hey, there's this huge missing component in my skill set, which was flexibility and mobility, which I found out later was really the base. It was the foundation for everything. Anything, whatever my clients wanted to achieve, whether it was weight loss, optimal strength, stability, function, flexibility, mobility really was sort of like, we need to get that sorted out first before we start kind of progressing you into these, bigger things. And it was a good approach. It kind of worked for me. The certifications that I took really kind of helped, sort of guide me down this path of body work. And that became sort of my new passion. And that's kind of where I am today. So I mainly do, stretching and fascial work and massage. That's kind of my bread and butter. But I sort of came from a fitness background. So it was kind of cool having the fitness background first, because it kind of gives you a good understanding of, muscular anatomy and movement. And you can kind of start to connect the dots over time. When you've kind of been immersed in an industry for long enough, you kind of start to see how, hey, you know what? I used to train this person this way. Now I have a kind of a better understanding of fascial lines. Now I kind of understand why, maybe they're stuck in this position. Maybe, some of this trigger point release will actually help them move better back. And so you start to just kind of see the whole spectrum. And I think that's been really valuable for me as a practitioner. And now I run my own company, Stretch Health Canada. We're sort of located within the private golf club domain, Hunt Club, Sunningdale, Riverbend. And then we also have a private clinic where we treat the public downtown on Richmond and Victoria Street. So, and me and my team, we just focus and specialize in stretching people with really tight tissues. That's kind of our main focus. But most of us are registered massage therapists as well. We just kind of, really kind of just zone in on the lengthening of tight muscles and fascia. So.
I think that's something that I absolutely love that your and our relationship at the Hunt Club specifically, but even outside, is one of the things that's always bothered me about the fitness industry in general is sort of this sort of siloed approach of all the different practitioners. Like, I don't know, and I'm sure you've experienced it. Someone has a physiotherapist or a chiropractor or another trainer or something, and they're almost afraid to say that, oh, I'm working with a trainer, or I'm working with this massage therapist, and the other practitioners have this very sort of protective, like, no, like, but whereas I know there's things that I can't do, or I don't know how to palpate muscle tissue. I don't know what something's supposed to feel like, or if there's a deeper issue. So I'll be like, I've got a hunch something's going on here. I think you should go and see Ruli, and he's going to be able to have this hands-on approach and really be able to figure things out on a deeper level. And I know our clients really, really appreciate it, because that sort of teamwork feedback and forth. And I think for anybody out there who's ever thinking about getting into this industry, it is so valuable to just say to someone, look, I've never encountered this before. This is something new. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to put as much effort as I can into figuring out what's going on, or reaching out to somebody who I think will. So I've really enjoyed our relationship sort of with our clientele going back and forth.
Yeah, and it's great that you brought that up, because I think when you adopt that approach, I think at the end of the day, the ones who win are the clients. Really, yeah. Like it's all about them. And you just said it. We see it all the time. Physios and chiros and massage therapists and trainers. It's sometimes it's this turf war, or it's this battle of egos. And it's like, listen, if I don't quite understand something, I'm going to send you to someone who might. So that you can get the best bang for your buck here, because it's a smarter approach. It's a patient or client centered focus, and that's, in my opinion, what it should be. And I think that's what we've done really, really well. And I'm sure some of our mutual clients will attest to that as well, for sure.
I think just this sort of thought came in. I think some of that too comes from, I think I'm much more willing to do that now that I'm more comfortable in sort of my clientele. And because when you're starting out and you're like literally every client, that hour means something to your bottom dollar. Yeah. You're not nearly as likely to refer someone in that fear, like, oh God, maybe what if they like them better? But once you start to become settled in your business and you feel comfortable with that. So I think there's also, like, it's very easy for me to sit here and be like, oh yeah, refer out. But when I was starting out and I had 6 clients and every single hour meant something, I don't know if I'd be as comfortable saying that then as I am now.
I agree. I think I'd be lying if I said I didn't also feel that way when I first started out, because there's a lot of, personal training, in the early stages is very, very, there's a lot of insecurity. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's, it's tough, and sometimes can be cutthroat, especially if you're in a gym competing with other trainers for clients. So I get it. It's something that kind of you maybe it's easier to ease into that sort of mindset and approach once you've kind of gotten comfortable, like you said, and built strong long-lasting, trusting relationships with your clients. And also when you've worked on building that referral network too. I'm sure there's trainers out there who probably have, plenty of clients on their roster who need to be referred out, but haven't done the work into actually developing relationships with other skilled, like-minded chiropractors, physiotherapists, massage therapists, you name it, right? So that's important too. I've written essays and stuff all about the importance of developing that referral network and how it can actually pay you back when you network with the right people, because it becomes a synergistic relationship where you guys should be sending clients to each other, and it becomes this sort of, it's a reciprocal thing.
Exactly. Like if I think our interaction and our relationship at the beginning is a great example of that, because we could very easily have been very protective of our clients when we first met, and Rui, if we viewed each other as adversaries, but I send clients to you, you send clients to me. It's all about how you approach things.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
It's turning into a business.
Yeah, it's like
I like it.
So, and we said we don't know where this conversation is going to go, but why don't we get to the topic of today? So, if you want to kind of talk about what we had spoken about, and we're going to give our different viewpoints on something specific. So, go ahead. I'll let you kind of lead that conversation.
Yeah, when we were thinking about what we could do and I think it'd be fun is to try and approach different things that we see within our clients and how we would approach them differently. And one of the things I'm really interested to get Rui's view on is, I don't know if I'm supposed to talk to you in the third person or the first person.
I don't know.
I'm really interested to get your view on so when we're talking about muscle tissue, the difference between how you would approach or identify neurological tension versus mechanical tension. So my view of that, you talked about the Stretch Health Canada. I imagine hip flexors and sort of that anterior hip structure is probably a huge thing that your therapists are going to work on. So a lot of what I see with individuals is people will come into me and say, my hips are tight. I need to stretch my hips. I need to lengthen my hips. And that would make sense, thinking that they spend 8 to 10 hours a day, maybe even more, in a seated position. Whereas what I've found out quite a bit is, I'd say a vast majority of the people I work with, their hips are tight, but what they actually are is very weak in that shortened position.
Mm-hmm.
So my view of neurological tightness is, so if your muscles are weak in a position, weak muscles creates instability. Instability is going to create pain.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Your brain saying, hey, I need to create stability somehow. So your central nervous system creates this neurological tightness. It actually, subconscious to you, you're not telling things to be tight, but it's your central nervous system is essentially telling those hip flexors to create stability in a shortened position. So what I found with people is, and this is where a lot of the time I find things like self-release, like foam rolling, if not paired with proper exercise, like post or movement after that mobilization, if you foam roll the shit out of something, trying to lengthen it, and your central nervous system saying, no, you don't have strength here. You need to be tight, or your lower back's going to just explode.
Yep.
Well, you're sending your body mixed messages. So, whereas mechanical tightness would actually be like you've had some sort of scar tissue or an injury or something like that. There's actually been damage to it. And I'd be super interested in your view or opinion on that, if that's even a real thing, or
yeah,
I don't know what the research says either, which is what I need to do more.
Yeah. It's I actually really like that. The things that the way you're kind of describing it, it kind of stems around sort of this interplay between systems, because like you said, if you're locked in a short position and you think, okay, well, I just need to open this up. But your nervous system is going to be like, hey, wait a minute. No, 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 no. We're not stable or we're not strong here. Like, you know, and that can kind of, you know, has this sort of almost like a cascade effect to, you know, joints, tissues above and below wherever things might be tight. And that kind of creates problems. But yeah, that's one way to look at it for sure. I think that's I think not the way that I would maybe explain it to a client. Well, I think it kind of depends, right? The way I would address something, because we talked about neural tension a little bit. So when we talk about, because it sounds like you're kind of talking about mechanical tension and almost maybe proprioception or body awareness and maybe like instability, which makes sense from a structuralist standpoint, like myself, talking about it from a very, very sort of basic perspective. Neural tension and mechanical tension are, we see them all the time, right? And I guess I'm going to use my little skeleton here as an example. For people who are maybe experiencing tightness or pain, who maybe they're not sure, it's like, am I tight? Is it just tight muscles? Is it a tight joint capsule? Is it just cueing? Like, is it just your technique? Is it your posture, right? Because any one of those things can create what seems like, okay, I'm tight somewhere, right? Now, if you guys can see my skull here. Okay. So we have nerves that run throughout our entire body that exit out of these foramina all along our spinal cord. And those nerves are, just imagine they're these like long threads of lines that basically weave through different structures. They weave through muscles and fascia and in between bone and through lymphatic tissue, and they innervate everything, right? Because this is the system that tells our brain where we are in space. It's what controls movement and, you know, gives us feedback and all sorts of things. So we have these, you know, these nerves. So if you imagine for a moment, this little elastic here is a nerve thread. So this would be like the super information highway that gives information to and from the body to the brain. And
I think that's important what you just said there too. It is a multi-directional. Like, a lot of people only think of the nervous system as a going out, but your brain is not making decisions. It's not sitting in there thinking, okay, I need to do this next. I need to do this next. It is simply reactive.
Yeah.
So if that input, like, the only reason I know to take, if I put my hand on a hot plate, the only reason I know that's burning is because that effort information coming back from those nerves is coming back and saying, this is dangerous.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I think that's super important. That you said it's a highway. It's going both directions.
Absolutely. So that nerve, hopefully this stays here. So if you imagine for a moment, we have these nerves, and it's I tried to be clever with my analogy here, because one of the techniques that we use in manual therapy, we call Nerf flossing. And you can literally imagine it like you're literally flossing your teeth. So if you imagine the actual dental floss being, you know, one of your peripheral nerves, and what it needs to do is it needs to be able to slide and glide freely in between those teeth, right? If for now we imagine the teeth are, you know, muscles, it could be a bicep, it could be a clavicle, it could be, you know, different structures around the body, but nerves should be able to have some relative motion or movement through those structures. So what we see in clinic, and again, we see this all the time, is that we'll see people who have high amounts of neurological tension. So somewhere along that continuity of that nerve, it'll literally start to stick, or it'll get blocked. It'll start to adhere to structures. And then when we try to pull it through, we can't. It's almost like it's not moving. There's no slide and glide. So that would be an example of neural tension. And some of the techniques that we do in manual therapies. I mean, we can do assessments to see, you know, we have upper limb tension tests, we have lower limb tension tests that we do to test different nerves. And that'll give us an indication of, okay, maybe there is some neural tension, but the sensation is a little different too. And actually, if you don't mind, we'll do a quick sort of demo on the call right now of, you know, the difference between, you know, a stretch feeling versus a neural stretch feeling. So if you guys can kind of see me here, I'm going to flip this around. Oh, this might actually work. So if anyone is watching, if you take your forearm and you straighten that elbow and you just take your hand and wrist into a nice straight position or extended position like that, you might start to feel a little bit of a stretch on that forearm flexor group, okay? Now, that's great. You're taking muscles from origin to insertion and you're pulling them apart, and that creates a lengthening state of tissue and it creates sort of a stretch sensation. Now, I'm going to take that same stretch, but now I'm going to apply that concept of Nerf flossing so that you guys can feel and understand what it means to take that piece of thread and to lengthen it from the foramina all the way to its periphery where it innervates. So if you take a wall, some sort of flat surface, and you place your palm flat so that your fingers are horizontal, if you guys can see that, keeping the arm perfectly straight, what you want to do is slowly turn your body away from that wall and then bend your head to the opposite shoulder and tell me if it feels a little different. Some of you might still feel a good stretch in the forearm, but now a lot of you will start to feel really deep stretch sensation through the bicep, maybe through the shoulder. So what we've done, we've taken one of your nerves that kind of exits out of that cervical spine and goes all the way through that arm and into the fingertips, and we've put that line on pull. So that would be a form of a Nerf floss, right? And you could do, you know, different techniques where you can kind of bend your head and move the wrists in different positions, but that's essentially the difference between kind of, you know, just taking an isolated group of musculature and putting it in a stretch state to actually flossing and stretching an entire line of continuity. And it's funny because nerve distribution actually really closely resembles a lot of the things we see in the fascial, you know, meridians and things like that too. They kind of, you know, they're when you overlap them, they're very similar.
Similar.
Yeah. So that's kind of how when we talk to our clients about, you know, neural versus mechanical tension, that's usually, you know, how just a really simple way to kind of describe it. So a little different than I think how you were describing more of that. Yeah, you tie in more of a proprioceptive piece to it, right?
So for me, I love everything you said there. For me, I approach it almost more in terms of a passive versus active. So, for example, like one of my favorite examples is like if you take someone's like hip adductors, so your groin and things like that. If I stand here and put my foot up on this chair,
yeah,
I could get it even higher. So essentially, my adductors are straight out to the side, almost at 90 degrees.
Yeah,
I can do that the same with the other one. So those tissues, those passive tissues, I can't even come close to that doing the split. So as a therapist, you know the tissue on the inside of your groin often crosses the side, right? Like they all meet up in the pubis. There's no tissue going from one side of the leg to the other.
right.
So if I can get one leg up to the side, if I can get the other leg up to the side, technically, I should be able to do the splits. But my brain or central nervous system knows I don't have the strength to do that without hurting myself.
Yeah.
So if I decide to go down and do the splits, I'm going to get as far as my central nervous system is going to allow me to go. And then that neurological tightness, that neural pathway is going to say, no, this isn't safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I one of the big things that I see and one of the things I love about your practice is, you, I think real change when it comes to self manipulation and things like that, there has to be an active component to it. And this
Yeah.
is why I was super excited to talk to you about it, is because I know you put as much emphasis on post treatment with your clients as you do. Because one of my favorite sayings is passive input is going to lead to passive results.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can try and passively, if essentially, so you know the Golgi tendon apparatus.
The GTO.
Yes.
Yep.
So for non, essentially, the Golgi tendon apparatus is, it's just a special nerve. Think of it like a fuse in a house. It's like a safety switch.
Yep.
Right. So every tissue or every muscle tissue or fiber in the body has a safety switch saying, this is where I think it's safe, this is comfortable. And that safety switch is set or based off of the load of what we do in our daily life.
Yeah.
So if we sit in a bunch of crappy positions all day long, our safety switches are set in very minimal ranges.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And that neurological tightness is to try and keep us within those safe ranges. Yeah. So if some outside force comes and pulls your leg over your head or stretches, there has to be an active input into it. Like I know you do a lot of like someone will press into you and then pull back. Yep. So you're bringing an active element to that stretching, which is so important.
Yeah.
Whereas that's why you look at the stretching research is this. So like you could go into Google Scholar right now, and if you took one stance on stretching, you can find 10,000 articles that support it. You find the other stance, you can find 10,000 articles that support it. It's really, and it's one of those crazy things where, like, I think anecdotally, you have to take that into account, but as much as the research, it's like that active component, at least what I found is that active component has to be there.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, and it's one of these things where when you look at the spectrum as a whole, you look at it in its entirety. There's everything from mobility and flexibility to stability to strength to power. You have this sort of natural continuum of these different biomotor abilities, and I think where our industries marry really well, between bodywork, sort of massage, manual therapy, stretching, rolfing, you name it, and personal training and fitness and coaching, is, I think we love to help people access new range, right? So, and most of it is passive. I mean, like you said, we can do some PNF work to help people, kind of access new range, and also to get them a better understanding of how to fire muscles in a lengthened position. And we can save this for another talk because I don't want to go too long today, but we can talk about some of the work that you do with your cars and what that really means and why it's important to be strong in those different sort of difficult to access ranges or positions. So where our industries, again, like I said, where they marry well is that we can help people access new range that they may not have been able to do in the past. But if I help someone, go from, maybe like a half squat to achieving a full depth squat just by opening up all these different things in their hip, but they don't actively practice that squat post mobilization, it's going to be rendered useless. And this is exactly that pivotal moment where if you have a network and a skilled trainer that you can send your clients to help get them strong in those new positions that they weren't able to do before, that's the whole purpose, right? Because again, I can give you range, I can help you access new positions that you weren't able to do before, but now you got to learn how to be strong. You got to train the brain and groove those patterns so that you can develop proprioception, strength, stability in that newfound range. So,
yeah, well, and that's so funny because like I'm trying to make sure that we can focus on one thing, but it's there's so many things
it's
that I
hard.
think we need to talk about. And a lot of it you have to think of is like, what's your your real goal? So 5 years ago, I was so like anti CrossFit. I was just like it's just injuring people. But I've completely changed my tone now because who am I to say doing a CrossFit workout isn't what someone wants to do? If they want to do that, that's my job as a strength coach is to give them the best joint possible to do that. I will always say those type of workouts are going to lead to more injury, but that's not for me to say that one form of exercise is better than another. Like I shouldn't really care about that. The big thing so if I had to sort of break down my skill set as a strength coach, if I had to break down my skill set, not setting up a camera apparently, is joint segmentation. So I don't care what sport you do, it doesn't matter anything. Your brain doesn't know you're cycling. Your brain doesn't know you're doing CrossFit. Your brain doesn't know. All it knows is the signals and the forces coming back to your brain. That's what it's reacting to.
Yeah.
So I don't really believe in movement patterns because there's a lot of research that shows out there. Like there's one of my favorite studies. They took somebody and they put them in a dark room so there's no stimulus. They had them touch their nose, then they touched a dot on a screen. Touch the nose, touch a dot on the screen 500 times. All right? Yeah. But they were measuring your brain activity and they were measuring energy muscle activity. What they found was there wasn't the same activation in your brain or in your muscles once in 500 times. So think of how simple that movement is.
Yeah.
So what they found was that your brain is constantly changing, variables change, you're thinking about something. So if you think of a skill that simple, your brain didn't use the same sequence once.
Right.
Something like dribbling a basketball or running or jumping or doing like a clean and jerk.
Yeah.
The weight is half an inch this way. Your weight shifted this way. So what my job as a strength coach really is to give people options or movement variability.
Yeah.
I want you to have infinite amount of positions to control, and unless you practice that, you're not going to gain that. So, and that's what we talked about before, is it really comes down to intent, and you have to consistently move your body. Like there's literally no way to get around it.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things. So you talked about the cars before, and we can go into this detail, and maybe you can talk a little bit about joint capsules and how joints stay healthy. That might be a really good thing to talk about. But so one of my favorite analogies is, so most people know a car engine needs to have oil, right? So the engine moves around, it flashes the oil everywhere, keeps all the parts healthy from wearing out. Your shoulder joint is literally like that engine, but instead of oil, it has what's called synovial fluid. Joints have super shitty blood supply. So you break a bone 4 to 6 weeks later, it's as strong as it was before you broke it. You dislocate your shoulder. I work with people that 40 years ago dislocated their shoulder, and it's still not as strong as it was because it has such shitty joints. So joints don't get their nutrients from blood. Joints get their nutrients from synovial fluid. All right? So if I don't move my shoulder for 30 years, of course the parts of the joint aren't going to get that fluid, and they're going to deteriorate and break down. So it sounds so stupid and simple. Like, if I move my shoulder, I'm literally lubricating and moving that fluid around and keeping it healthy. So when I did that right there, I literally just delivered nutrient-rich fluid to parts of my shoulder that weren't getting it when it was down low. It seems too good to be true. But
Well, simple works. Yeah, I agree, and that's a perfect analogy, and it's true. It's a different, and again, we can save this for a later talk, but the difference between maybe healing and things that are primarily avascular in nature, like a joint, versus things that are have a rich blood supply, like a muscle. And why that's important, especially in a rehab stage, and everything. So that's brilliant, though. But yeah, I love that.
Sorry, I got a little heated there. I was.
Yeah, no, it's great though. This is great. It's like I don't know. I was thinking about before we started this, if we should give this talk a name, and I thought maybe something about two nerds in a skull or something. I don't know. Like
that can be the working title.
Yeah. We'll figure something out. But this has been great, man. I think we'll end it there, just so we don't go too far over time. We could talk for hours and hours and hours, and so we'll try to kind of deliver this in short, valuable sound bites for our audiences who are watching, and we'll repost this. We'll repost it on our social media feed, and I might even look at maybe throwing up some stuff for a YouTube channel too, if you're interested in doing that. Yeah. But yeah, this has been fantastic. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, because I always learn a lot just hearing you talk, and it's great. And it's a lot of the things that you talk about often just bring me back to that movement sort of mindset. Back when I was a personal trainer, and where that's all that I did. It's always good to kind of revisit that, and talking to people who are in it. It's fantastic, because again, it just helps kind of reinforce that idea of connecting those dots, understanding what your role is, what your realm of genius is, where you specialize, and how you can kind of leverage other practitioners in the other industries to kind of help just connect those dots to make sure that clients are getting maximum bang for their buck. Again, this is something where, again, I'm sure you'd agree, it should be a client-centered focus or a patient-centered focus, and not this ridiculous turf war that we see so much, right?
And I think anytime you make it about your client, and you said this before, that's when you start building your clientele network, because people know that people can sense when you're doing something genuinely for them.
Yeah.
And they appreciate it. And that's when, if someone asks you, do you know a good massage therapist?
Yeah.
We can give you that recommendation so quickly.
Exactly.
And I couldn't agree more. This is, like, I feel like because we always just see each other fleetingly when crossing the club, like you coming in and going out, and like if we ever got 20 minutes to chat with each other, it was so much fun. It's like, oh man, I wish we could keep going. So
yeah, exactly.
So I want to put this in your mind for Wednesday.
Yes.
I really want to talk about intrinsic foot strength, and like the importance of, like, so what is it? There's like 33 joints in the foot.
It's something ridiculous. Yeah, it is.
So if we want to talk something, one of the things we talked about, like or make a list. I made a list of like top 3 things that like undertrained areas.
Sure.
I want to do a deep dive into the ankle and the foot complex, and how it is like, it's literally our contact with the world.
Yeah.
And when was the last time someone even focused on their foot or their ankle strength training?
Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely set that up, and it's that's something that I'd be really excited to talk about too, because there's again, from a structuralist standpoint and a body worker, the foot is a magnificent piece of machinery. It is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. People don't understand. We take for granted how complex a foot and ankle are, and when you start seeing it, especially in cadavers, when you get, you watch a cadaver dissection video of a foot, it's like, it's something out of something like Leonardo da Vinci couldn't have formulated in his prime. Like, it's absolutely phenomenal. So
think of it this way, like they replaced knees and hips like that.
Yeah.
Like, I think we know one person, and it was like some super experimental like ankle replacement.
Yeah. And
yeah,
it's the only one I'd ever heard of or seen.
Yeah, because it's not something that you can just throw a piece of metal in there and it sort of works the same. Like, it's
Yeah.
It's ridiculously complex. So I think that would be really cool to chat about on Wednesday.
I'd love it. Let's do it, man. So Wednesday, it'll be all about foot and ankle. And this has been so much fun, Steve. I appreciate you coming out, and looking forward to Wednesday. Any final thoughts you want to share?
Oh, keep moving. Just move.
Yeah.
There's don't be worried if you're doing something right or wrong. If it causes pain, stop. But just there's move every joint as much as possible. That's the best thing I can say.
Especially in this, in this time of quarantine, where it's really easy to sit and do nothing for very long periods of time. Listen to Steve, right? Keep moving, and movement is good medicine. So we'll wrap it up there. Steve, thank you so much. We'll chat again Wednesday, and looking forward to it, buddy.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
Okay, have a good one.
Bye.